always hate to see this session come around in our big book study because it always means it's coming to a close for Joe and I, anyhow. We always love to talk and share the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, especially with a group like this one. I think as we begin to look at this last step of those last three, step 12, I think we maybe should look at that step as a three-part step. It really is multiple parts. There are three parts to it. And the first part of it says, I think, the greatest promise that we can possibly find in the big book anywhere. And it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Now, I put that thing in singular. It didn't say a result, some result. It said the result. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. If we remember back to the original manuscript, step 12 said, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of this course of action. And that's really what the steps are. We've been able to see that, a course of action. That's why they call it a program. It is a planned series of events which take place in a certain sequence, a course of action. And I think what it does in the first part of step 12 is promise to me that if I would use those first 11 steps to the best of my ability, then I am assured that I will have this spiritual awakening as the result of those first 11 steps. And we've already looked at a spiritual awakening, and we've already found out what it really is. It is a personality change sufficient to recover from the disease of alcoholism. It is that new and triumphant arch through which we finally pass to freedom. Bill tells us in the 12 and 12 there's as many different spiritual awakenings as there are people in AA. He said they all have certain things in common. He said that is that we're able to feel and believe and do things that we could never do before on our own strength unaided. And based upon that definition of a spiritual awakening, today I feel that I have had one of those things. Now, I feel things that I never felt before. Today I can feel love, tolerance, patience, and true compassion for my fellow human beings. And I never could feel that before. I didn't know what love was. I thought love was mixed up with sex. Today I realize sex doesn't have a thing in the world to do with love. Love is true understanding, a true want, a true desire to help our fellow man. And today I feel that. And never before did I have time for my fellow man. They came right after me always. Today that's different in my life. Today I believe things that I never believed before. Today I believe that God is a kind and a loving God. I believe He stands ready to help any human being, anywhere, when they accept defeat and ask for help from Him. I believe He's ready to give it at any time. And I never believed that before. I always thought God was a punishing God. And I don't believe that anymore. I've seen too many pieces of evidence to the contrary. I don't believe that anymore. If He was a punishing God, then people like me would never have been able to recover from our disease. Oh, I'm thankful that He gave me mercy instead of justice. Yeah. Today I can do things that I could never do before. Well, by golly, I can stay sober. And I never could do that before. So based upon that conception of a spiritual awakening, I believe I have had one as the result of the first 11 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now then that I've had it, my book charges me in the middle part of the step with another awesome responsibility. It says we tried to carry this message. And you'll notice it is singular again. Not a message, not some message, but this message to those who are still suffering. And what is this message? This message is very simple. It is the message of the spiritual awakening to be found in the first 11 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't really myself have too much trouble anymore with God's will. I did for a long time. But today I firmly believe this with all my heart, that God got tired of seeing alcoholics die way back in the 1930s. And I think God decided to do something about it. And God has always worked with people through people. Very seldom does God ever come down and speak to us right in our head and say, this is what I want you to do. He hasn't done a hell of a lot of that since Moses' days. Oh, we have one or two that claims he still does it now. We've got one back home that claims to have the telephone line directly to him. I don't know whether he does or not. If he has, he won't share the phone number with anybody else. I know that. I believe God took Bill and Bob and Bill Dotson and Ebbie and Roland H. and Dr. Yoon and Dr. Silkworth and Sam Shoemaker and a few other people in the Oxford groups and put together a program of recovery for the alcoholic because he was tired of seeing us die. I believe God has always chosen the ones that He wants to do His work for Him. And I believe if He chose them in the 1930s, which I believe that with all my heart, then I must also believe that He still chooses them today. You know, I don't know why He would have done it then and not still be doing it today. You know, 97 out of 100 alcoholics are going to die without ever even knowing what's wrong with them. 3 out of 100 might possibly stumble into AA and find out what their problem is and find out what the solution is and follow a program of action and recover. Now, I used to think, God, why am I an alcoholic? But today I think, God, why am I not one of those that's dying from the disease? How come I'm the one that's lucky enough to recover? Now, I believe God chooses the ones He wants to work. And I believe He understands fully that He must let us go through alcoholism if we are to be of any use. We must experience this thing before we could help another human being. And I believe after He chooses us, He watches us as we go through our disease. And I believe He keeps us alive while we're going through it. I doubt if there's an alcoholic in the room tonight that should not already be dead. Many of us should have been killed countless numbers of times. And we always woke up the next day and we said, man, wasn't we lucky last night? Oh, I don't think luck had anything to do with it. I think every alcoholic in this room can recount at least one of those experiences of some kind or other. I think when we have learned what God wants us to learn, and I think when we know enough to be useful in His scheme of things, that He removes the obsession to drink. You know, I didn't do anything to have it removed. I don't know how it was removed. I woke up one day in a hospital with a clear mind for the first time in many, many months and years, and I could see what alcohol was doing to me, and I could see it with clarity, and I could see it with a desire to do something about it. And my mind had been filled with alcohol and drugs for a long time. Joe woke up one day on a bar stool in Little Rock, Arkansas. And his mind could clearly see what alcohol was doing to him with a desire to do something about it. And every alcoholic in the room that's sober today, the same thing happened to us. Now that did not come from us. That came from a power greater than we are. And God removed the obsession to drink, and I think now the only question is, are we going to do what He wants us to do? And the book tells us back in step 9 what we're about. It says our real purpose is to fit ourselves for maximum service to God and our fellow man. God has always told the human race, you only got to do 2 things to be happy. He's always said, put no other gods before me. And that doesn't necessarily mean idols. That could be money, power, prestige, sex, or anything else. And then he said, do what you can for your fellow man and you'll be happy. I think he has fit you and I with a very unique piece of information. And I think he has fit us with this unique piece of information so we can be of help to a very unique group of individuals. Don't ever let anybody fool you. You and I are the experts in the field of alcoholism. We know more about alcoholism than anybody alive. We have experienced. You and I are the experts in the field of recovery from alcoholism. We know more about it than anybody alive because we have experienced the recovery. And all successful programs today that are designed to treat the alcoholic come right back to this basic source and find out about their disease from AA and find out about recovery from AA. Sometimes we think we're second-class citizens and we look upon those people in the professional field as being gods themselves, and they don't know as much about it as we do. They don't have the ability to avert death in other people that we have in this field of alcoholism. I doubt very seriously if God really cares where I live. You know, I used to pray and have Him show me where I should be living. I doubt if He really cares where I work. I doubt if He really cares who I'm married to. I think what God is concerned about is, Charlie, what are you doing with what I have already given to you so freely? You know, there's an axiom that is a spiritual one that's as old as man himself, and that is that you can't get something for nothing. There are no free rides. And if you are going to take this and receive it in your life, then you're going to have to turn around and give it back to other people. And if you don't, sooner or later you'll lose what you got. Well, people like to think that Bill Wilson went to Akron on purpose to call on Dr. Bob, but he didn't do that at all. The hell, he went there to make money. And he almost got drunk. And the only reason he called on Dr. Bob is because he knew if he didn't, he was probably going to end up taking a drink. Now, hopefully he would help Dr. Bob, but that isn't why Bill went to see him. Bill went to see Dr. Bob to keep from getting drunk himself. And I think each of us must remember this. There's no stopping point. There's no going back. We must continue further and further and further. And I think the greatest growth that I've experienced in my lifetime has been through working with other alcoholics. You know, they force you to learn. They ask you things you can't answer. And you've got to go find that answer somewhere. They suffer problems that you see and you want to help, and you must know the right information to help them, and they will force you to learn. I think I have grown more through this part of step 12 than I have from all the other steps put together. Now, I think today that Joe and I might possibly be the luckiest people in the world. Now, I think today that maybe, just maybe, our wills have coincided with God's will. That's the only reason I can see that I'm alive. That's the only reason I know that Joe is alive. You know, some 24 years ago, there was a little fellow named Ora. Ora was in the insane asylum in the state of Arkansas. And Ora had a big book in his hand. He had a carton of Camel cigarettes. And Joe was in there with him. And Joe was willing to talk to Ora about the big book simply because Ora had a carton of Camel cigarettes. And Ora told Joe that if you'll go to this meeting they have here on Wednesday night, there'll be 3 guys here from AA. And they'll bring a pot of coffee and 3 packs of cigarettes. And Joe left the back wards of that insane asylum to go to an AA meeting, not to find the spiritual life, but to get a cup of coffee and a cigarette. Now, Ora died from his disease, and Joe's still alive. There's a fellow that came to see me about 19 years ago in my kitchen, And he sat down with me and he told me about his disease. And he asked me if I would attend a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous with him, which I did. And this fellow's name was Floyd. Floyd has never been able to get any long-term lasting sobriety in AA. Floyd is a wet brain now. Floyd is crippled and can hardly walk. And Floyd is dying from his disease. I wonder why. I wonder why. And I think you and I both have this responsibility to give to other people what has been given to us. There's nobody else in the world can do this job. Very few people in the world today get the opportunity to avert death in literally hundreds and thousands of people. You and I have been given that opportunity. For the first time in my life, I feel that I am useful to the human race. For the first time in my life, I can see where I might be able to help my God and my fellow man. I never could do that before Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the greatest promise that I've ever received in my life. And I think when you and I begin to do God's will, then we will receive more and more and more. Now, I think our fellowship today is in great danger. And I think it's in great danger not from those out there, but from those in here. We are beginning to shirk our responsibilities. We are beginning to let other people do our work for us. We pick up a drunk and we take him to the treatment center and we dump him out on them and we say we made a 12-step call. No, we didn't make any 12-step calls. Hell, a taxi cab driver could have done what we did. A 12-step call is when we sit down with another alcoholic ourselves and we discuss our disease of alcoholism and we discuss our solution and we show them a practical program of action and we take them by the hand and we walk through that program of action with them and help them recover from their disease. That's our job. And we're not doing that anymore in AA. A 12-step call, you take a drunk that's shaking and trembling and he don't have any place to go. And the hospital won't take him. And nobody wants him because he's sick and he stinks. And he's got a beard about a foot long and hadn't had a bath in a month. 12 steps called and you take him home and you put him in your bathtub and you clean him up and you put him in your bed and you help him sober up. He'll never forget that. Alcoholics never forget the people that help them. And if we don't stop shirking our responsibilities and putting the load on somebody else, then how can we expect those in the future to protect AA itself? We're letting people come to AA today who know nothing about the disease, who know nothing about recovery, and we're letting them set the tone of our meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous. We're letting them determine what we're talking about. And if they don't want to talk about what we think they should, then we get our feelings hurt and we say, by God, I'll just stay home, to hell with it. And when we do that, we've abdicated our responsibility. Our job is to do this work. Our job is to carry the message, this message. Our job is to see that recovery is talked about in our meetings. Our job is to see that every new member has the opportunity to understand the big book and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Our job is to walk with them through this program. Man, it's easier to stay home at night. It's easier to lay in bed by a warm body at 2 in the morning in the wintertime than it is to get up and make a 12-step call. But you know, if I don't do that, then surely, sooner or later, God will withdraw from me what He has given to me. I've been told that for years and years and years, and I believe that with all my heart. I also believe this. I don't believe alcoholics have changed. Now, people say AA is different today. They say people coming to AA are different. I don't believe that. People coming to AA today are human beings. And human nature never changes. Times change, places change, buildings change, but human nature never changes. And the drunk today is the same as the drunk in the 1930s. And I believe what was valid in the 1930s is valid today. And I can't think of a better place to find out how to work with a drunk than the chapter in the big book called Working with Others. In this chapter it tells us exactly how to make a 12-step couple. In this chapter it tells us exactly how to sponsor another alcoholic. In this chapter it tells us when to let loose and when not to let loose. In this chapter it tells me when to do this and when not to do that. And I believe if you and I would go back to our chapter 7, Working with Others, and study and read and do what it says, I believe that we can become very effective in helping alcoholics who still suffer. But if we don't go back to these things and start doing these things, someday our fellowship may fail. And people say, oh, it'll never fail as long as God wants it. I don't believe that. Hell, God's given mankind lots of good things throughout history. And every good philosophy of life has failed in the past. And it always fails because those who are there quit doing what they're supposed to do. And I think our book tells us what to do and how to do it. And if we do it, I believe we can preserve this thing for generations to come. But if we don't do it and we fail, we can't say that they caused us. They're not going to hurt us. There's none of them out there can hurt us if we do what we're supposed to do. The only way we can get hurt within AA is to quit doing what we're supposed to do. And then we may be hurt. Let's look for just a few moments at the middle part of step 12, Working with Others. Let's go over to page 90, and Joe and I will just kind of briefly skip through a few of these things and see what it says about working with others. On page 90 in the first paragraph, it says, when you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a later opportunity. This advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing they are dealing with a sick person. If there's any indication he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. Get an idea of his behavior, his problems, his background, the seriousness of his condition, and his religious leanings. You need this information to put yourself in his place, to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. Very few of us today go to this much trouble. We get a 12-step call, we usually blunder right square into the middle of it, and the only thing we know is the guy's drunk and what his name is. We need to know about him. If I am to interest him in what I have to offer, I need to find out how to approach him. And the only way I can find out how to approach him is find out all I can about him. Try to find out what he's going to think when I say God. Or should I talk about a power greater than myself? Or should I say God as I understand him? It will vary perhaps with different individuals. Find out all I can about his drinking, where he drinks and how he drinks and who he drinks with. And then maybe I'll be able to talk to him and get him interested in what I have to say. Page 91, last paragraph. See your man alone if possible. At first engage in general conversation. After a while turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. You will thus get a better idea of how you ought to proceed. If he is not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit. But say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. If he is in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles liquor has caused you, being careful not to moralize or lecture. If his mood is light, tell him numerous stories of your escapades. Get him to tell you some of his. When he sees you know all about the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. Give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of the spree. We suggest you do this as we have done it in the chapter on alcoholism. If he's an alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your mental consistencies with some of his own. If you are satisfied that he's a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. This is what Dr. Silkworth told Bill to do. And this is what Bill did when he talked to Dr. Bob. Show him from your own experience how the queer mental condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. Don't at this stage refer to this book unless he has seen it and wishes to discuss it. And be careful not to brand him as an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that possibly he can, if he's not too alcoholic. But insist that if he is seriously afflicted, there may be little chance he can recover by himself. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the condition of the body and the mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. In other words, do the same thing the big book did. You know, it started with the doctor's opinion, didn't it? And there it talked about the hopeless condition of the mind and the body, the fatal malady. It talked about the allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind. You know, this is what they've been waiting to hear. Every drunk wants to know, how come I can't drink anymore? Why can't I quit now that I want to quit? And if we can give him that information, we can give him something that no other human being alive can give to him. We don't talk about his drinking. When Floyd came into my kitchen, the greatest thing that ever occurred in my life is Floyd talked to me about Floyd's drinking. My God, everybody else had already talked to me about my drinking. And I was so relieved that I could have hugged him and kissed him when I found out he wasn't going to talk about my drinking. So when he told me about his condition of the mind and of the body, most assuredly I identified with him. And I thought for the first time, here's a guy that understands me. And that's what we can do, and that's what nobody else can do. A person who's not an alcoholic cannot identify with an alcoholic to this extent. A person who has not recovered from our disease cannot bring about and talk about recovery to another alcoholic like we can. And that's our job. And that is our beginning, to convince him of what his disease is by sharing with him our disease of alcoholism. And that's what our book did for us in the very beginning.
Again, as Tom just said, we talking about a growth step. One of the greatest ways to grow in the last 3 steps, and of course you mentioned is working with an alcoholic. With the 11 steps we receive from the 11 steps, and the 12th step we give. And it's been said it's more blessings to give. There's more blessings in the 12th step of giving, than the 11 steps in which we receive. And he tells us so much the 12th step is to enable this person who is an alcoholic, who doesn't know he's an alcoholic just like we were. We don't know what's going on in our lives. But we may need an opportunity for him to see himself through us. And that's what we do when we go to the first step. And we show him our experiences. He can see where he is through our problem. As we discuss our problem, he can see his problem within us. And he can identify with us. And he can find himself. And only if we have the information and ability to do this, because we have had that experience. And this, after we do this, We let him ask us the question. After he finds himself in us, after he sees that maybe he's alcoholic, let him ask us the question, if he will, and then tell him exactly what happened. Now we're going to give him the solution. Once he has a problem, then we come to stress this spiritual feature freely. The man is agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not agree with our conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense. The main thing is he'd be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, that he can live by spiritual principles, and this is step 2. Once we do that, then we talk to him about the solution, once he sees this. And we're talking about actually, laying down, and only we can lay these two things down and to take this person to the program of recovery, which he'll have to do. But we can help with just 1 and 2 to see and get him the foundation for our recovery. And I think, the great, I know, just like everything else in AA, if you knew at this, you're going to make mistakes. And I know the many people I worked with in the early days in AA, I seen many guys that be laying in bed half dead, and I started them out on step 3. I said, man, you need God. You really need God. Some of them I started out on the inventory. I really was just but we started the person out on the first step. And we have the ability to tell by telling our story to let him see himself in us. We are the only examples of that this alcoholic may see. We are the only alcoholics in the world. We don't realize that the only alcoholics in the world are in AA. We're the only people in the world is alcoholics. The rest of the people ain't alcoholics. So, and we can do this. And as Charlie said, it's more than just carrying a person to a detox center. Like anybody can do that. Every time I get into this story, and this is not a joke, he said no more jokes, but this is the truth. You laughing already?
I'll tell Lou Bell on you again.
I carried the guy to the detox center one evening, and it was late in the evening. I was in the office, and it was a pretty hard day. It was on a Monday. I had to go back to work. Drunks always do something at the worst time. And it was just a hectic day on a Monday, and I got a call about 4:30. A drunk was in the local emergency room, and they wanted to try to get into detox center, and they got a lot of state vehicles, but they can haul everybody else, but they can't haul a drunk. So they called me, like they do us, to help drunks, and I carried him to the detox center. Now, I never picked the guy. I never knew the guy when I picked him up, and when I got there, they were glad to see me. They're real nice to you when getting a drunk off of their hands. And so I got this drunk and put him in my car, and quite naturally, hauled us about 20 miles to the detox center. He didn't like all of them, do they? As soon as you get out of traffic, they go to sleep, So he was sleeping, slept all the way to the detox center. I pulled up, and just there's one place it seemed like you get there, wake up when you start slowing up. So when I stopped the car, he slowed and got him out and carried him in. And quite naturally, in these places, they do have all this paperwork to do on drunks. They got to know all the information. He's got to answer all the questions. And ask him, what's your name? And for some reason or another, non-alcoholic people think that drunks can't hear. Drunks, and nothing wrong with their ears. They can hear it, but they can't record it up here. And most people will scream at a drunk. They'll talk loud. He can't. He can hear it, but he can't make it work. And they said, "What's your name?" And he told them. And they asked him, "What's your address?" And they went through all these questions. He said, "What's your mother's maiden name?" He told them. In fact, she was getting tired, and I was getting tired, and this drunk was getting tired. And finally, she said, "What's your birthday?" He said, December the 17th. She said, "What year?" He looked at her. She said, "What year?" He said, "Every goddamn year." Now that's the logic of a drunk,
You see how you can grow by working with other alcoholics.
Nothing like it.
Back again briefly to this first paragraph on page 93. where we're talking to this alcoholic about our solution. We've already told him about the problem. Now we're talking about the solution. It says, tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be an agnostic or an atheist, make it emphatic that he doesn't have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in the power greater than himself and that he live by spiritual principles. This is exactly what our big book did for us. After it showed us the problem, it then showed us the solution. Chapters 2, 3, and 4. I don't know why we fully realize that our recovery is dependent upon God as we understand Him, or a power greater than Him. Yet we seem to be ashamed to talk about God, especially when we're talking to a new person. I don't know whether it's shame or whether it's fear. But if we are to help a person become honest with himself, then most certainly we're going to have to be honest with them. And if they don't want to talk about God, that's okay. If they don't want to use this power, that's okay. If they want to go drink, that's okay. That's their business. But our business is to help him recover through our program of recovery, which talks about God all the way through. And it says, stress the spiritual feature freely. Don't be worried about whether he's going to run off or not. It's not going to hurt anything if he really does. We're not playing a numbers game. We're trying to help people save their lives. Page 94. Outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, step 4. How you straightened out your past, 8 and 9. And why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass it on to him actually plays a vital part in your own recovery. In other words, the third thing we do is lay out the practical program of action. And that's what our book did for us in chapters 5 and 6. And we took those steps from 3 through 11, and we recovered from our disease. Page 95, middle of the page. If he's not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act only as a banker for his financial difficulties or a nurse for his sprees, you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. This he may do after he gets hurt some more. We're not playing a numbers game. We don't measure success by all those we keep within the fellowship. We're trying to help other people recover from the disease. And if he's not interested in what we have to offer, about the best thing to do is say, well, perhaps you need to find another way to recover. Drop them, leave them alone, and go find somebody else to work with. If he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. And we can't force that desire on anybody at all. If he thinks he can do the job some other way, or prefers some other spiritual approach, encourage him to follow his own conscience. We have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach at work for us. They point out that we alcoholics have much in common, and that you would like in any case to be friendly, and let it go at that. On page 96. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. On page 97. For the type of alcoholic, bottom of the page, for the type of alcoholic who is able and willing to get well, little charity in the ordinary sense of the word is needed or wanted. The men who cry for money and shelter before conquering alcohol are on the wrong track. Yet we do go to great extremes to provide each other with these very things when such action is warranted. This may seem inconsistent, but we think it is not. It is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, The alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than God. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking as long as we place dependence on other people ahead of dependence on God. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trusts in God and clean house. You see, this is a spiritual program. And it used to be practiced in a spiritual way. And I think that's where we need to go back to today. Practicing a spiritual program in a spiritual way. And as I continue through this chapter, it will tell me how to work with this person after he's gotten sober, after I've brought him into the fellowship. It will tell me how to sponsor him through his sobriety. And I don't think I can just tell him what he needs to do and then leave him with that. I think I must be willing to help him do that. You know, if he wants help in step 3, I think I must be willing to go with him and help him take step 3. If he doesn't understand 4, I most certainly need to help him understand it. If he's willing and wants to talk to me in step 5, then I should make myself available for that purpose. Because as I walk with him hand in hand through these steps, not only does he recover and learn, but I also learn and I add to my recovery. This is the greatest learning experience that we can possibly have. In the beginning, I was afraid to do it. I was afraid that I would hurt him. I was afraid I couldn't tell him the right thing. I was afraid I was too inexperienced. And my sponsor finally said, "Charlie, quit worrying about that." He said, "Hell, you can't hurt him." He said, "He's going to die anyhow. Somebody's got to help him." And he said, "You're just as well equipped as anybody else." And I think everyone in this room is equipped to do this job if we are willing to do it.
There are many more promises on page 100. It says, "Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen." When we look back, we realize that things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we'd ever could plan. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will pleasantly live in a new and a wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. And I think, this is working with another alcoholic is a real strength of our lives. And so much in detail, our book does tell us exactly, just like it does every other step, how to work this step. Now, one of the greatest confusions, is the 12th step. We just kind of doing a lot of other things, offering assistance and stuff, and not carrying this vital message to other alcoholics. Another thing, our responsibility, I think that it says in the first of the page, it talks about how the wonders of seeing Alcoholics Anonymous grow right along from an individual's life, and seeing the fellowship grow around us. We know we don't want to miss this, and some of us have had the opportunity. I know it's one of the greatest opportunities in my life is to see other people recover from alcoholism. And then at the end of this, he says we practice these principles in all our affairs, and we talked about principles throughout the program. And it says in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, after these were set out on page 60 quite plainly. He said, many of us explained what in order I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one about it has been able to make anything like perfect adherence to these principles. He was just talking about 12 steps. We are not saints. The point is we're to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have just set down are guides to progress. He had just set down the 12 steps. So the 12 steps are the principles that we practice in all our affairs. And it's quite obvious that these are the principles of our program, is the 12 steps. The 12 steps are not new. I mean, they are old as mankind himself, if we really look at it. The way they're written, the form, But it contains, as we found out, the principles that spell out the design of living. We talked about the design of living. We talked about spiritual, we talked about the mind, we talked about our physiological, sociological relationship with other people. And the principles are the laws on which something is based. And if we follow those basic laws, and they never change, the principle never changes. Like what goes up going to come down. That's a principle. It's always that way. And it was set by something greater than man. And if we follow these principles of these laws, then we will live within them, then we will get success, have a successful life. Everything everything on the face of this earth has principles to the way we use it, whether it be a pencil or a typewriter or automobile. Everything has a principle. And then if we go by the basic principles of which this product is designed and use it, we get more use out of it. And the same way about our lives. My problem all my life was I never had principles to live by. I never knew the laws. I never knew the directions for living. And that's the great miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, that it can give people the rules or the guidelines to live by. I never had the guidelines to live by. I never had the directions. No one ever showed me how to live. And it's amazing then that you can live in the world so long and to be exposed to so many things. I went to school and I was in the family and I went to church. No one seemingly ever got the directions to live over me. No one ever sat down and ever showed me how to live. Now, I had many people to teach me the rules. Now, there's a whole lot different in the rules and directions. I knew the rules, but I didn't know the directions, so I busted all the rules. I just had trouble with rules. But it's very peculiar, you know, after you learn directions, you don't have a lot of problems with the rules. And Alcoholics Anonymous gives us the basic principles of living. And you know, when we make a product, and we go buy a product at the store, and we do, we buy many different things or gadgets. We buy this new thing that we spend our money for it, so we want to get the best use out of it. After all, we spent our money for it. And after we carry it home and we open it up in the box, they have a simple set of instructions on how to use this thing. And the closer we follow those instructions, the better use we get out of the product. Everything has a way for it to be used, and surely the human life is the same way. We can find these in the big book, the 12 principles in the big book. We can find them in the book of books. Many great books contain, or many great religions. They might all sound different, but within them contains the same basic principles of successful living. And if we apply those principles of life, then we'll get better use out of our lives. It seems as though that the person that we bought the product from, they made the product and they wrote the directions. God created man, and He also, as He created man, He created a set of directions for man to live by. And these are within the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if we can practice these principles in all our affairs, we'll find serenity, peace of mind, and all the other things that we search for in the program. And surely we won't have to take alcohol, we won't have to drink and take alcohol and take drugs to destroy our lives. So this is what he's simply saying. Apply these principles to all our affairs. The 12 steps. The principles, which are basically the principles of successful living. That's all they are.
You know, I love to look at that, practice the principles in all our affairs. It's easy to practice the principles here within AA. You know, we all love each other in AA. We're all willing to help each other. We're willing to give in and let the other person have what they need. We're willing to go out of our way to help each other. But what do we do when we leave AA? What do we do in the outside world? What do we do on the job? What do we do in our own home? You know, I've got to realize the 12-step program applies to everything in my life, not just my alcoholism. If I want to be happy, I've got to recognize my powerlessness over my wife. You know, I can't get her to do anything that I think needs to be done. I've got to recognize I'm absolutely powerless over that. I've got to recognize the insanity of trying to control another person's life. I've got to turn my will in my life over the care of God as I understand Him in respect to other people. I've got to inventory myself sometimes and see, why can't I turn loose of her? Why do I have to keep demanding things out of my wife and my children? I've got to talk about that to another human being. I've got to find those defects and ask God to take them away. I've got to make my amends to her if I've harmed you. I've got to practice these principles in all my affairs. And if I do that, I might be happy in my home. I've got to do it on my job. I've got to do it everywhere I go. Because I want peace of mind and serenity and happiness 24 hours a day in my life. It's no good to have it an hour twice a week in AA and not have it elsewhere. Because sooner or later it'll probably take me right back to drinking. And I believe should be no misunderstanding about these principles, nor in the practice of them in all our affairs. Bill tells us in the preface to the 12 and 12 that the 12 steps are a set of principles, spiritual in nature, which, if practiced, will expel the obsession to drink. I don't think there was any doubt in his mind at all about what he meant when he said principles. The 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I apply them in all my life and all my affairs, then I can have peace of mind and serenity and happy everywhere I go. Not just in AA. Let's close by going to page 164, which is the last page of the last chapter, the last page of the recovery section. Now, I think Joe and I are probably deliberately prolonging this a little bit. I know you guys are ready to go to bed. Perhaps the reason we are is because this seems to have been a special weekend. And we don't say this very often, believe me. I have felt something different here, and Joe has too. I don't know whether it's because of the place or because of the people, because God's with us or whatever, I don't know. But we want you to know this has been a special, special weekend for us. And we appreciate the opportunity to be here and share. Because this is how we grow too. And we never do one of these but what we don't grow. We learn something new. We learn more about our book. We learn more about people. We learn more about ourselves. And this weekend happens to have been one of those special, special opportunities. Don't you agree? Huh? Okay. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who's still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God, and we do that in steps 1, 2, and 3. Admit your faults to Him and your fellows, and we do that in 4, 5, 6, and 7. Clear away the wreckage of your past, and we do that in 8 and 9. Give freely of what you find and join us, and we do that in 10, 11, and 12. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Thank you all for letting us be.
Thank you.